Hello, guys. Welcome to the world of science fiction. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you won't miss any of our exciting new stories. Get ready to dive into a world of imagination.
Ryland Deo, a striking human with blonde hair and piercing blue eyes, paced anxiously across the small room he rented on Cephon Prime. He'd been stranded on this alien world for months, his ship impounded and his funds depleted. Outside his window, the neon-lit city bustled with vibrant life, a world of opportunities just beyond his reach. The rent was due, and he was completely broke. A firm knock on the door snapped him from his thoughts. He knew that knock. It was Zara Cloth, his landlady. With a deep breath, Ryland opened the door, flashing his most charming smile. Standing there was Zara, her lavender skin glowing softly under the dim lights, her white hair falling like a cascade down her back, and her intense, sapphire blue eyes fixed on him. "Mr. Dio," she greeted, her melodious voice sending a chill down his spine. "We need to discuss your overdue rent." Ryland leaned casually against the doorframe, adopting an inviting posture. "Please, Zara, call me Ryland. Come in, let's talk." She stepped past him into the room, her skirts brushing against him, her presence both imposing and mesmerizing. "Ryland," she began, facing him with a steady gaze, "today's the first of the month. You know what that means." Ryland ran a hand through his hair, exhaling. "Yes, I know. The rent. Look, Zara, I swear I'm working on it. I've got some leads, some opportunities. I just need a little more time." Zara moved closer, and he caught the faint, exotic scent of her perfume. "Time is a luxury I may not be able to extend," she murmured, her hand lightly touching his collar. "Unless—" Ryland's pulse quickened at her touch. "Unless?" he asked, his voice unsteady. Zara's lips curved into a playful smile. "Unless we can reach some kind of arrangement. I'm sure a charming rogue like you has many talents. Perhaps there's something you could do for me in exchange for a bit of leniency." Ryland swallowed hard, aware of the tension between them. The way she looked at him, the heat in her eyes, her voice layered with subtle hints. It was an invitation. Part of him wanted nothing more than to accept, to take her in his arms and surrender to this alien beauty. But another part, bound by his sense of honor, held him back. He gently lifted her hand from his chest, looking at her with sincerity. "Zara, I deeply appreciate the offer, and trust me, there's nothing I'd like more than to express my gratitude. But not like this. You deserve more than some broke spacer trying to sweet-talk his way out of debt. I respect you too much to take advantage of your kindness." Zara blinked, a flicker of surprise crossing her face. She stepped back, observing him with newfound curiosity. "You're different, Ryland Dio. Most men wouldn't refuse an offer like that." Ryland shrugged, a faint smile on his lips. "I guess I'm old-fashioned that way." Zara's expression softened thoughtfully. "1 week. I'll give you 1 more week to come up with the rent." "Thank you, Zara. I won't let you down," Ryland said, a surge of relief washing over him. With a week's reprieve, Ryland threw himself into finding work. He roamed the streets of Cephon Prime, chasing down every lead and rumor. He haggled with merchants, bluffed his way into high-stakes card games, even took on risky courier jobs. Gradually, the money started to come in. Throughout the week, Zara's presence seemed to follow him. She was there in the boarding house's hallways, at the bustling markets, and even in his dreams. Her subtle touches, lingering glances, and teasing words filled his mind, sparking a growing tension between them. One evening, she leaned in close, her voice a sultry whisper. "You know, Ryland, if you ever need a way to unwind after a long day, my door's always open." Ryland's heart pounded, his body reacting to her nearness. "I'll keep that in mind," he managed, his voice thick with emotion. Zara's eyes gleamed mischievously as she left him, her words echoing in his mind. Despite the temptation, Ryland stayed true to his resolve, channeling his energy into his work, determined to make things right. At the end of the week, he stood in Zara's office, a stack of credits in hand. "Here's the rent, my lady," he said with a flourish, placing the money on her desk. Zara counted the credits, a smile curling on her lips. "Well done, Ryland. I'm impressed." Ryland felt a swell of pride. "I promised I'd come through." Zara rose from her chair and approached him, trailing a hand up his chest. "Now that our business is concluded, perhaps we can discuss other matters," she murmured, her eyes filled with a new kind of intensity. "Other matters?" Ryland asked, his breath catching. Zara leaned in, her lips just a hair's breadth from his. I think you know exactly what I mean. And then she kissed him, her mouth warm and insistent against his. Their passion ignited, and they stumbled into her private quarters, hands exploring, clothes falling away. They collapsed onto her bed, their bodies entwined. Ryland marveled at the softness of her skin, the graceful curves of her alien form. Zara moved beneath him, her nails digging into his back, urging him on. They moved together, their connection growing stronger with each moment. Afterward, Ryland held her close, gently stroking her hair. "Stay with me," she whispered, resting her head on his chest. "Stay here on Fawn Prime." Ryland pressed a soft kiss to her forehead. "There's nothing I'd like more." And so the human found a home, and the alien landlady found love in the most unexpected of places. The next morning, Ryland woke to the first rays of sunlight streaming through the window, reaching out for Zara, but her side of the bed was empty. He listened, expecting her familiar morning routine, but instead, he heard a muffled cough followed by a groan of pain. Concerned, Ryland dressed quickly and knocked on her door. "Zara, are you okay?" After a pause, her voice came, weak. "Come in, Ryland." He entered to find Zara propped up in bed, her lavender skin pale and damp with sweat, her sapphire eyes dulled by illness. "Oh, Zara," he whispered, sitting beside her, his heart aching. "What's wrong?" Zara attempted a small smile, but it faltered. "It seems I've caught the blasted Siphanantha. Thought I could tough it out, but..." She trailed off, coughing painfully. Ryland's jaw clenched as he faced the painful reality of medical care on Siphon Prime. The system was stacked against the poor, the sick, the vulnerable. But there was no way he was going to let Zara suffer. "Don't worry about it," he assured her, voice firm with resolve. "I'll get you the medicine you need. I promise." Zara weakly squeezed his hand, her gaze soft. "Ryland, you don't have to do this. You're barely getting by yourself as it is. I can't let you. You're not asking." He interrupted gently, brushing a strand of damp hair from her forehead. "I'm offering. You've done so much for me, Zara. You gave me a home, a chance when no one else would. Please, let me do this for you." A tear slipped down her cheek, her voice trembling. "I don't deserve you, Rylandio." He smiled softly, leaning in to press a kiss to her forehead. "You deserve the world, Zara Kylo, and I'm going to make sure you get it." For the next few days, Ryland searched the city, desperate to find affordable Sione flu medication. He visited every clinic, pharmacy, and back alley dealer he could find, but it was the same everywhere. Supplies were running low, prices were soaring, and the epidemic was spreading uncontrollably. Out of options, he turned to the only resource left, his old contacts from a past he'd sworn to leave behind. He'd vowed never to go back, but for Zara, he would do anything. With a heavy heart, he made the call. "Grix," he said, voice tight. "It's Dio." A surprised chuckle echoed over the comm. "Well, well, well, if it isn't the prodigal son. Thought you'd gone straight, Dio. What happened? Honest life not paying the bills?" Ryland's grip tightened. "I need a favor, Grix. I'm looking for Sione Ondu meds. Can you help me?" A pause. Then, "Might know a guy, but it's going to cost you." Ryland's stomach dropped. He knew what working with Grix meant. The risks, the moral compromises, the cost. But he couldn't stand the thought of losing Zara. "Name your price," he said, keeping his voice steady despite the dread churning inside. When Grix named the amount, Ryland nearly dropped the comm. It was more than he'd make in a year, even if he worked around the clock. But he couldn't back down. "Fine," he said through gritted teeth. "Tell me where to meet your guy." So began Ryland's descent back into the criminal underworld. He accepted every job Grix threw at him, no matter how dangerous or degrading. He worked in mines, factories, docks, taking shifts no one else wanted, driving himself to the point of collapse. He smuggled contraband, ran illegal errands, even took part in a few heists. Through it all, he took care of Zara, bringing her food, helping her bathe, holding her through the worst of her fevers. He hid his bruises and exhaustion, not wanting to burden her further. But Zara wasn't oblivious. She saw the toll it was taking on him, the dark circles under his eyes, the strain in his shoulders. One night, as he held her shivering form close, she looked up with fever-bright eyes. "Why are you doing this, Ryland?" she asked softly, her voice barely a whisper. "Why are you killing yourself for me?" Ryland swallowed hard, emotion catching in his throat. "Because I love you, Zara," he said, the words slipping out before he could hold them back. "I'd do anything for you. Anything." Her eyes widened, her breath catching. You? You love me? He nodded, a sad smile crossing his face. I have for a long time. I just didn't know how to tell you. I didn't think you'd feel the same for someone like me. Tears slipped down her cheeks. Oh, Ryland, she whispered, reaching up to cup his face. I love you too. You're the most amazing person I've ever known. They held each other close, their love a brief reprieve from the pain and uncertainty surrounding them. For that moment, nothing else mattered. Not the illness ravaging Zara's body, not the dangerous path Ryland had chosen. They had each other. And for now, that was enough. But reality returned too soon. Zara's condition worsened despite Ryland's efforts. The medicine Grix promised always felt just out of reach, the price climbing higher every time Ryland thought he'd saved enough. He was running out of time, and he was scared. One night, as he sat by her bedside, holding her hand while she slept fitfully, he made up his mind. He couldn't lose her. He wouldn't. No matter what it took, no matter what he had to sacrifice, he would save her. Heart-pounding, he entered a seedy bar on the outskirts of Safon Prime. Smoke and the stench of cheap liquor filled the air. The patrons, humans and aliens alike, all wore the same hard, desperate expressions. He scanned the room, searching for the contact Grix had set up, a rival gang leader willing to trade the Sioni Andu medicine in exchange for Ryland's participation in a heist. It was a dangerous move, but he had no other choice. Zara's life was at stake. A figure emerged from the shadows, his reptilian features and scarred hide identifying him as a Borgoth, a notoriously ruthless species. Deo, he hissed, his forked tongue flicking. I hear you're in need of some supplies. Ryland nodded, his jaw clenched. I am, and I hear you can provide them, for a price. The Borgoth grinned, sharp teeth flashing. Yes, the job's simple, a smash and grab at Fawn Prime Central Bank. You get us in, we get the goods, and you get your medicine. Easy as that. Ryland's stomach twisted. A bank heist was madness. The security at CPC was airtight. Failure would be catastrophic, but he had no other choice. I'm in, he said, keeping his voice steady despite the fear racing through him. When do we start? The heist was scheduled for the next night. Ryland spent the hours in a fog of preparation and dread, his mind torn between planning and worry for Zara. That evening, he visited her, heart sinking at her frail figure, her once vibrant skin now ashen. Hey, beautiful, he murmured, taking her hand. How are you feeling? She managed a weak smile, her eyes flickering open. Better now that you're here, she whispered, her voice thin and hoarse. Stay with me? Ryland swallowed hard, fighting tears. Always, he promised, slipping into bed beside her and wrapping her in his arms. I'll never leave you, Zara. Never. They held each other through the night, their love a fragile shield against the shadows looming around them. Ryland memorized every detail of her face, the feel of her skin, the sound of her breath, knowing it might be the last time he'd ever hold her. Morning arrived too soon. Ryland carefully released himself from Zara's embrace, placing a soft kiss on her forehead. I love you, he whispered, his voice breaking. Don't ever forget that. And then he was gone, bracing himself for what lay ahead. The heist began smoothly. Ryland's expertise from his previous life allowed him to disable the bank's security systems, granting access to Borgoth and his crew. They moved swiftly and efficiently, filling their bags with cash and precious stones. But as they were about to make their escape, everything fell apart. Alarms blared, security doors locked, and the unmistakable sound of police sirens filled the air. Ryland's heart sank as he grasped the truth. They had been set up. Borgoth turned on him, fury burning in his eyes. You! He snarled, his clawed hand clenching around Ryland's throat. You led them straight to us. Ryland struggled, his hands clawing at Bor's grip. No, he gasped. I didn't. I would never. But it was too late. Bor threw him to the ground, his head slamming against the marble floor. Pain exploded in Ryland's skull, and through his agony, he saw Borgoth and his crew making a run for it, abandoning him to take the fall. Cold despair washed over him. He had failed Zara, failed himself, and now he would pay the price. The police found him barely conscious, surrounded by incriminating evidence. They dragged him away, his hands cuffed, his future bleak. In the days that followed, Ryland lingered in a cell, his thoughts consumed by Zara. He didn't even know if she was still alive or if his sacrifice had been in vain. The uncertainty gnawed at him, more painful than any physical wound. When the guards finally came for him, Ryland felt almost relieved, At least he would now face his fate. But the news they brought was worse than any punishment. Zara was dead. The words struck him like a physical blow, knocking the breath from his lungs. He fell to his knees, a silent cry of anguish tearing from his lips. She was gone. His love, his light, everything he'd cherished, gone forever. And it was his fault. The guards left him alone, broken and sobbing on the cold concrete floor. Nothing mattered anymore. Not his freedom, not his future, not even his life. Without Zara, he felt like nothing. Time became meaningless as days faded into darkness and despair. Ryland existed in a fog of grief, his once bright spirit faded and gray. He hardly noticed when they released him. The charges against him mysteriously dropped. He wandered the streets of Sci-Fi Prime, a ghost in a world that no longer held any warmth or color, until the day of Zara's funeral. Standing at the back of the crowd, he kept his eyes on the sleek silver casket that held what remained of his heart. Aliens of all kinds had gathered to honor her, a tribute to the love and light Zara had given to so many. As the service ended, a figure approached him, moving purposefully through the crowd. Ryland's breath caught as he saw her face. She looked just like Zara, with lavender skin, sapphire eyes, and waves of white hair cascading down her back. But she was younger, her face softer, her presence innocent. "Are you Ryland?" she asked, her voice an echo of her mother's. He nodded, unable to speak. She took his hand, and the warmth of her touch sparked something in his numb heart. "My name is Asha," she said gently. "Zara was my mother." Ryland's eyes widened, his heart pounding. "Your mother?" Asha nodded, a sad smile playing on her lips. "She told me about you in her last days, about your love, your sacrifice. She wanted me to find you, to tell you." Her voice cracked, tears glistening in her eyes. "To tell you she loved you until the very end." Ryland wrapped her in his arms, his own tears mingling with hers. They clung to each other, two grieving souls united by their love for the woman who had touched them both. In that moment, Ryland felt something he thought he'd lost forever: hope. In the weeks after Zara's funeral, Ryland found himself drawn to Asha, who embodied so much of the woman he'd loved and lost. She was like her mother in so many ways, the same sharp wit, gentle heart, and fierce determination. But Asha was also her own person, with dreams and passions, a unique spark that captivated Ryland in ways he couldn't quite explain. He took it upon himself to guide her through the complexities and challenges of life on Sci-Fi Prime. Asha had been studying off-world when Zara fell ill, and her return had been a whirlwind of grief and new responsibilities as she tried to fill her mother's role. Together, they worked to keep Zara's boarding house running. Then, with Ryland handling repairs and maintenance, while Asha managed the tenants and finances. The work was hard but meaningful, a way to honor Zara's legacy and the home she'd created for so many. As days turned to weeks, Ryland and Asha grew closer, their shared work and shared sorrow forming a bond that went beyond friendship. They found comfort in each other's presence, in their easy conversations and exchanged glances. But Ryland held back, his guilt and grief still raw. How could he think of moving on, of finding joy again, when Zara's memory was so vivid? It felt like a betrayal, a violation of her memory. Asha sensed his hesitation, the inner struggle he couldn't shake. One evening, as they sat together on the rooftop terrace, watching Sci-Fi Prime's twin moons rise, she turned to him, her sapphire eyes soft with understanding. "She wouldn't want this for you," she said quietly. "My mother. She wouldn't want you to spend the rest of your life mourning, punishing yourself over things beyond your control." Ryland swallowed, his throat tight with emotion. "I know," he whispered, "but it's not easy. I loved her, Asha, more than I ever thought I could love anyone. And in the end, I failed her. I couldn't save her." Asha took his hand, her touch warm and steady. "You did everything you could, Ryland. You loved her, fought for her, and were willing to give everything for her. That's not failure. That's the greatest gift anyone can give." She paused, holding his gaze. As she held his hand, Asha loved him deeply and wanted nothing more than for him to find happiness, joy, and purpose in life again, even if it wasn't with her. Ryland felt a bittersweet ache in his chest, knowing Asha was right. Zara had been the most selfless, generous person he had ever known, and she would want him to have a second chance at love, even if that love was with her own daughter. The thought excited him, but also filled him with unease. He couldn't deny the attraction he felt for Asha, the way his pulse quickened when she was near, the way his skin tingled at her touch. But the idea of pursuing those feelings, of crossing that line, made him uncertain. Asha seemed to sense his inner turmoil. She smiled softly, squeezing his hand. "It's okay, Ryland," she said gently. "We don't have to figure everything out right now. We have time. Let's just focus on the present and be there for each other. We'll see where it leads." Ryland nodded, a wave of gratitude and affection filling him. "Thank you, Asha. I don't know what I'd do without you." She leaned in, resting her head on his shoulder. "You'll never have to find out. I'm here for you, Ryland, for as long as you'll have me." They sat together for a long time, drawing strength and comfort from each other's presence. The silence between them was filled with unspoken understanding. As the days passed, Ryland and Asha grew closer. They settled into a routine, working together, laughing over meals, and spending long evenings talking, learning each other's hopes, dreams, and fears. Slowly, the wounds of the past began to heal, the pain of loss fading into bittersweet memories. Ryland found himself smiling more, laughing more easily. His heart began to open to the possibility of a future he had once thought was gone forever. And at the heart of that future was Asha. She was a balm for his wounded soul, a light in the darkness that had consumed him. With her, he felt alive again in a way he hadn't since Zara's death. Perhaps it was inevitable that their relationship would deepen into something more. A touch here, a lingering embrace there, until one night, under the twinkling lights of the Sifan Prime skyline, their lips met in a kiss that felt like coming home. They took their time, savoring every moment in their journey together. Their first real date, a picnic in the city's lush gardens. Their first time making love, a night of tender passion and whispered devotion. The first "I love you" shared in the quiet of dawn, their bodies entwined, hearts beating as one. For the first time in a long time, Ryland felt incandescently happy. But life, as he had learned, wasn't always simple. Their newfound happiness was disrupted by the sudden arrival of a figure from Asha's past, her estranged father, Zoran. He appeared without warning, entering the boarding house like he owned the place, his cold blue eyes scanning Ryland with open disdain. "So, this is the human my daughter has been wasting her time with," Zoran sneered, his voice dripping with contempt. "The one who let my beloved Zara die." Ryland felt Asha stiffen beside him, her grip tightening on his arm. "Father," she said, her voice tight with barely controlled anger. "You have no right to be here. No right to speak to Ryland like that." Zoran scoffed. "I have every right. I'm your father, and I won't stand by and watch you throw your life away on this inferior creature." He turned to Ryland, his eyes cold and unforgiving. "I know what you did. I know how you failed Zara when she needed you most, and I won't let you do the same to Asha." Ryland's heart sank, the familiar weight of guilt and self-loathing rising within him. Part of him wanted to run, to escape the truth in Zoran's words, but then he felt Asha's hand in his, her strength flowing into him. He met Zoran's gaze, steady and unflinching. "You're right," he said calmly. "I failed Zara. I'll live with that regret for the rest of my life. But I loved her with everything I had, and she loved me. That's something you can never take away." He took a deep breath, standing tall. "And now I love Asha, and she loves me. What we have is real, it's good, and it's worth fighting for, and I'll fight for it, for her, with everything I have." Asha stepped forward, her chin raised, her eyes blazing. "I choose Ryland, Father. I choose our love, our life together. And if you can't accept that, then you have no place here. No place in my heart." Zoran's face twisted with rage. For a moment, Ryland thought he might strike them, but with a final venomous glare, he turned and stormed out, leaving a heavy silence behind. Asha collapsed against Ryland, her brave facade crumbling as tears fell. He held her close, murmuring words of comfort, his heart aching for her pain. Yet even in that dark moment, he felt a spark of hope, an unshakable certainty. They would face this and anything else together. Their love was strong, forged in the fires of loss, grief, and sacrifice. It had brought them both back to life, and it would endure through whatever challenges the future held. Ryland and Asha's life settled into a new rhythm, their love a constant presence as they managed the boarding house. They faced every challenge as a team, growing stronger with each shared victory and setback. It was a life Ryland had never dared to dream of, a future he thought was lost forever. But with Asha by his side, he felt anything was possible, even starting a family. They hadn't planned it. They hadn't even discussed it. One morning, when Asha approached Ryland, her eyes gleaming with a mix of joy and nervousness, he immediately understood. "Ryland," she whispered, taking his hands in hers, "I'm pregnant." For a brief moment, time seemed to stand still. His heart skipped a beat as the weight of her words settled in. A baby. Their baby. A perfect combination of human and Sioni, a living symbol of their love. Tears welled in his eyes as a smile spread across his face. He pulled Asha into his arms, spinning her around joyfully. "Really?" he asked, his voice thick with emotion. "Are you sure?" Asha nodded, her tears spilling over as she laughed. "I'm sure. I went to the medic yesterday. They confirmed it." Overwhelmed with emotion, Ryland kissed her deeply, pouring all his love and wonder into the kiss. When they finally parted, breathless and grinning, he rested his forehead against hers. "We're going to be parents," he marveled, his hand gently resting on her still flat stomach. "I can't believe it." Asha placed her hand over his, her smile radiant and soft. "Believe it, my love. This is real. It's happening." In the days and weeks that followed, they threw themselves into preparing for the new addition to their family. They transformed one of the empty rooms in the boarding house into a nursery, painting the walls in calming shades of lavender and green, filling the room with all the essentials a baby would need. Ryland's love and protectiveness for Asha reached new heights as he watched her body change. He marveled at the miracle of it all, the glow of her skin, the sparkle in her eyes, and the gentle curve of her belly where their child grew. He spoke to the baby, read stories, and sang songs, wanting them to know his voice and feel his love even before entering the world. However, alongside their excitement, there was also a lingering sense of uncertainty and fear about the challenges ahead. How would they balance the demands of parenthood with the already chaotic life of running a boarding house? How would their tenants, friends, and neighbors react to the news of a half-human, half-Cephanantha child? Asha had distanced herself from her father after his cruel rejection of their relationship. Though he was still a part of her life, and thus their child's heritage, they decided to confront him together. They would present a united front, no matter how he might react. Asha sent him a message inviting him to dinner at the boarding house, hinting that they had something important to share. On the day of the dinner, Ryland was a bundle of nerves. His stomach was in knots as he helped Asha prepare the meal, set the table, and arrange the flowers. He wanted everything to be perfect, to create an atmosphere of warmth and welcome, even if Zoran's reaction was likely to be hostile. When the doorbell rang to announce Zoran's arrival, Ryland felt his heart race. He squeezed Asha's hand for strength. "Ready?" he whispered. Asha nodded, her own nerves clear in the tightness of her expression. "Ready." They greeted Zoran together, Asha giving him a stiff hug, while Ryland offered a polite nod. Zoran's gaze was cold and assessing, his posture rigid as he stepped inside their home. The dinner was tense, the conversation awkward, and Zoran barely touched his food. His attention was focused on Asha, particularly on how Ryland's hand rested on her knee under the table. Finally, when the plates were cleared away, Asha took a deep breath and met her father's gaze directly. "Father," she said, her voice steady despite her trembling hands, "Ryland and I have something to tell you." Zoran narrowed his eyes, his lips thin. "So, I gathered, get on with it then." Asha reached for Ryland's hand, their fingers intertwining. "I'm pregnant," she said, lifting her chin high, her eyes fierce with protective love. "Ryland and I are going to have a baby." For a long, heavy moment, Zoran was silent, his expression unreadable. Then, slowly, he leaned back in his chair, his gaze shifting from Asha to Ryland and back again. "I see," he said in a flat, emotionless tone. "And I suppose you expect me to congratulate you? To give you my blessing?" Asha's grip on Ryland's hand tightened, her knuckles turning white. "I expect you to be civil," she replied, her voice firm, "to respect our choices and our family." Zoran scoffed, the sound harsh and ugly. "Family? You call this an abomination of a family? A half-breed child, born of a human and a Cephanantha?" Asha's eyes flashed with determination. "I had hoped, Father, that you could be part of this, that you could accept our family and love your grandchild. But if you can't, if you won't, then you have no place here, no place with us." Zoran stared at her, shock and anger flickering across his face. For a moment, Ryland thought he might explode in rage, but instead he simply stood up, his movements stiff and jerky. "Very well," he said coldly. "If that is your choice, then so be it. But know this, you are no longer my daughter." With those words, he turned and strode out the door, slamming it behind him with a final, resounding thud. In the silence that followed, Asha sagged against Ryland, her brave front crumbling as the tears began to fall. He pulled her close, murmuring words of comfort and love, his own heart aching for the pain and rejection she had suffered. "I'm so sorry, my love," he whispered, stroking her hair and her trembling shoulders. "I'm so sorry you had to go through that." Asha shook her head, her eyes red but burning with fierce determination as she looked up at him. "No," she said, her voice tough but determined. "I don't regret it. I won't regret choosing you, choosing our family. My father made his choice, and I've made mine." She placed her hand gently on Ryland's chest, her touch warm and reassuring. "You and our baby are my family now, my home. Nothing and no one can ever change that." Ryland kissed her, pouring all his love, pride, and unwavering commitment into the embrace. They held each other tightly, drawing strength and comfort from the bond they shared, the love that had seen them through so much and would guide them through whatever the future held. And as they clung to each other, whispering promises and dreams, Ryland knew that this, right here, was where he was meant to be. With Asha, with their child, in the life they had built together. No matter what came their way, they would face it together, as one family, now and forever. As Asha's pregnancy continued, the challenges grew. Her body, unaccustomed to carrying a half-human child, struggled under the strain. She was constantly tired and in pain, often bedridden and unable to assist Ryland with the never-ending tasks of running the boarding house. Ryland did his best to shoulder the load, to be the pillar Asha needed, but he was only one person, and the work seemed endless. He found himself exhausted, physically and mentally drained, worried for Asha and their unborn child. It was during this difficult time that Zoran appeared. He showed up unannounced one morning, his usual stern expression showing signs of concern. "I heard about Asha's condition," he said without any introduction, his eyes shifting toward the stairs leading to their private quarters. "I'm here to help." Ryland stared at him, too stunned to speak. In the months since their troubled dinner, Zoran had disappeared from their lives. Ryland had assumed their relationship was beyond repair, that the wounds were too deep. Yet here, Zoran was, offering help, offering a chance for reconciliation. When Ryland told Asha about her father's arrival, she was cautiously hopeful. "We should give him a chance," she said, placing her hand on her growing belly. "For the sake of our child, for the sake of family, we should try." With some hesitation, Ryland agreed to accept Zoran's offer of help. At first, things were awkward. The two men moved around each other like cautious strangers, unsure of their roles and places. They disagreed on even the smallest issues, their different ways of doing things, leading to frequent arguments. But over time, as days turned into weeks, a quiet respect began to form between them. Ryland couldn't help but admire Zoran's work ethic, the way he threw himself into even the most tedious tasks. In return, Zoran seemed to develop a gruff kind of admiration for Ryland's devotion, his unwavering commitment to Asha and their child. One night, after a particularly hard day, Zoran slid a glass of Sioni and ale across the table to Ryland. "You're a good man," he said, his voice rough but sincere. "I didn't see it before, didn't want to see it, but I see it now." Ryland, taken aback and moved, raised his glass in acknowledgement. "Thank you," he said, his words heartfelt. "That means a lot coming from you." Zoran grunted, taking a long swig of his own ale. "I've made it hard on you, on both of you. My stubbornness, my prejudices blinded me to what really matters." He met Ryland's eyes, and for a moment, they seemed to reflect Asha's. "You make my daughter happy. You love her, support her, fight for her. That's all any father can ask for." Ryland swallowed the lump in his throat. "I do," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I love her more than anything, and I love our child." Zoran nodded, a small smile playing on his lips. "I know, and I'm sorry it took me so long to realize it, to accept it." He leaned forward, his expression serious. "I want to be part of your lives, part of my grandchild's life, if you'll let me." Ryland didn't hesitate. He reached across the table and took Zoran's hand in his. "Of course," he said, meaning every word. "Your family." From that moment on, things changed between them. The tension, the distance dissolved, replaced by a growing sense of camaraderie, a shared purpose. They worked side by side, swapping stories and memories as they tackled their daily tasks. Zoran opened up about his life with Zara, sharing stories of a love so deep and true it left Ryland in awe. In return, Ryland, he shared the story of his journey, the path that led him to Asha, to this life, and to this love. They laughed, they cried, and they bonded over both the joys and the sorrows they experienced together. Slowly, but surely, they became not just allies, but friends, and eventually family. When Asha went into labor, it was Zoran who stood by Ryland's side, grounding him as he nervously paced the halls, offering firm words of encouragement and support. It was Zoran who helped him calm his own panic, reminding him of his strength, his love, and his resilience. And when their son was finally born, a perfect, crying bundle of lavender and pink, it was Zoran who shed tears without shame, holding his grandson for the very first time. "He's beautiful," Zoran whispered, his voice thick with wonder and love. "Absolutely perfect." Ryland, holding a weary yet radiant Asha, could only nod in agreement, his own tears flowing freely. "He is," Ryland said, his heart so full it felt like it might burst. "Our little miracle." They named him Zarin, a combination of their names, symbolizing the love and unity that had brought him into the world. As they settled into their new life as a family, Ryland reflected on the twists and turns his journey had taken. He thought of Zara, the love and light she had brought into his life, the way she had transformed him, saved him. He thought of Asha, her strength, her courage, and her unwavering belief in him and in them. And he thought of Zoran, the unexpected bond they had formed, the family they had become. It was more than he had ever dreamed of, more than he thought possible. Yet it was real. It was his. It was a life full of love, purpose, and joy, the kind of joy that could light even the darkest corners of the universe. As he watched Asha nursing their son and listened to Zoran's off-key lullabies and tall tales, Ryland knew with certainty that he was home. No matter what the future held, no matter what challenges or triumphs they would face them together, a family, bound by love, choice, and unbreakable bonds of the heart. And as he held his wife and son close and met Zoran's tear-filled gaze over their heads, Ryland felt a deep peace, a sense of rightness. This was where he belonged. This was what he had longed for all his life. And now that he had found it, he knew he would never let it go. He was home, in every way that truly mattered, and exactly where he was meant to be.